let's rewind. Before your modern coffee maker existed, a man named Ashil Gadja, he had a spark of inspiration. Wouldn't it be cool if we could make a good cup of coffee without having to naturally brew it every time? He was frustrated with burnt tasting coffee and other methods produced at the time. But that's where it all begins, with a problem and an idea to solve it. So think of the guys behind Airbnb. They didn't start out to create a billion-dollar company. Their problem was they needed to make the rent. So they decided to take advantage of an opportunity. There was an industrial designers conference in San Francisco. And they said, wouldn't it be cool if we could rent out our air mattresses and give the people breakfast at the time? Why? Because accommodation that was local was either expensive or hard to get. And that's where Air Bed and Breakfast was born. They took advantage of the skills that they had available to them, and they created a platform, and they took advantage of the opportunity that was presented to them. So every product starts with that simple, sometimes random thought, what if? Now, if you've ever had a brilliant idea, and I'm sure that you've had at least one, as long as you thought it was brilliant, that's all that matters. So you know the next step. Let's make it real. And what do? You probably start sketching designs, maybe on the back of a napkin or a design app, trying to get your vision out of your head and onto a paper or screen. As a side note, do you know the phrase back of a napkin comes from the practice of carrying out business in restaurants in the 50s and 60s, when you had to get your idea down for understanding or garner a client. Now, once you've got your idea down on paper, all you need to do is make it. But unfortunately, transforming an idea into an tangible product isn't straightforward. There's still this misconception about product development that many still think it's just a straight line from idea to product. You have a brilliant thought, sketch it down, build it, and boom, you're a genius. Money. I've had many people come to the office thinking it's like that. Well, I had to break it to them, and sometimes I'm going to break it to you now. Product development is more like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle where someone keeps swapping the pieces and you're not entirely sure what the final picture is meant to look like. You can, like the image on the screen, just draw something and get it made if it's possible. But will it do what you want, what you think it will do? Will anybody else be interested or care? Will it be safe? That's where product development comes into play. Let me introduce you to the double diamond process, which looks straightforward, right? Just like this looks straightforward. Follow the recipe and the instructions. What could go wrong? The double diamond gives you an oversimplified graphical representation of product development process. Many institutions will suggest that all you have to do is follow the directions and anybody can create the product. If any of us have ever followed a recipe, at least some of us, likely most of us, have found out that it should be a disclaimer with a cookbook. Outcomes may vary. But I'm referring to it so you can follow what is essentially taking a winding, often revealing path towards innovation. It's divided into two diamonds. The first one is where you figure out what you're doing, and the second one is where you try to actually make it. With the Airbnb example, the guys set out to solve an individual problem. They had access to the skills to quickly build and deploy that platform, and an opportunity that required large investment. The worst that would happen is they wouldn't make the rent. So, for most innovation and development is not the case. Investment in solution is relatively high and opportunity is not necessarily straightforward to exploit. The first part of the double diamond is still about user research. Basically, that's where you wander around asking people questions. What do people actually need? It's not glamorous. You talk to users, you listen to their complaints about existing products, and quite often you quickly realize that what you thought was a brilliant idea is actually the last thing most people want. Most people with ideas assume the problem what they have, lots of other people must have it, and the solution that they've come up with is the solution that everyone wants. It's said that Henry Ford, inventor of the Model T car, said, if you asked the customer what they wanted, they would have asked for a faster horse. That's often wheeled out as a means to suggest that the customer doesn't know what they want, but in reality, it's the start of user research. What is the assumed problem? Start of the double diamond. The assumed problem is the horse is too slow. If you're a product developer and a potential customer said they wanted a faster horse, you would simply ask them, why? And with some user research questioning, you may find out that the instance that they have to take a long journey at the weekends from sun up to sundown, and it's a pain having to get up so early. If you question enough people doing some discovering, you may see a trend. From all that information, you can redefine the assumed problem of slow horse into the real problem. Journeys by horse take too long. I know some of you are thinking, but isn't it the same thing? Not quite. Say to someone, my horse is too slow, they may respond with, did you whip it? Is it tired? Is it old? Is it hungry? Is it thirsty? Now, say to someone, my journey by horse took too long. They may respond with, can you take the train? You see how it make a different response? Losing my notes here. Okay, let's say you had the bright idea for the new coffee mug that I showed earlier. Something innovative. Sure, everyone wants their coffee to stay hot, but after the discovery phase, you've done some research, you find out no one cares about mugs with 15 settings for temperature control. They're happy to just zap it in the microwave. But what you've defined from user responses is what people really want is the mug that doesn't spill. That could be the real problem. And now you've gone from cool new feature to that empties your bank account to a practical solution that addresses a real problem. So you redefine your entire plan based on what users actually need and what they're more likely to pay for, not what you thought they wanted. Once you've figured out the real problem, now comes the now comes the fun or chaotic develop part, the brainstorming. This is where your team gathers around armed with sticky notes and big ideas. No idea is too crazy, not yet. So you're sketching out different concepts, throwing ideas on the table, and sometimes even the bad ones lead to something useful. It's messy, unpredictable, and occasionally, hopefully, someone suggests something that's just so out there. So imagine a brainstorming session 150 years ago around my journey by horse took too long. So you've narrowed down your ideas, and now it's time to deliver, prototyping. This is the stage where you finally try to make your idea into something physical, something real. What I personally like to do at this point is crunch the numbers. I like to throw first principles into the mix. First principles are just a set of fundamental truths like 1 + 1 = 2, 1,000 cc equals a liter, and so forth. In the case of the mug, that keeps your coffee warm. It needs a heat source, and that heat source needs power, and you can calculate how much power it takes to keep the coffee warm, which will determine how many batteries you'll need, and in turn determine how big and how heavy the mug will be. And that will help you give you a solid starting point, saving you time and saving you money. You'll be surprised at the number of prospects that ignore first principles at the outset, only to get bitten later on. Anyway, so your prototype can be made out of paper, cardboard, foam, 3D printed. Your prototype should be as simple and as cheap as you can possibly make it. Anything to demonstrate your concept And it doesn't have to be one prototype. Multiple cheap prototypes demonstrating different facets of your concept can be better than creating one prototype, especially if it's the first prototype. And then at the end of the double diamond, now comes your testing phase, and this is where you let real users interact with your product or prototype. This is where you learn what's working and what's not. You're waiting for them to break it, both physically and emotionally. They tell you everything that's wrong, if it's too heavy, if it's too slow, if it's too confusing, everything you don't want to hear, but you need to. This feedback is essential because it shows you what to fix, and more often than not, the users point out problems that you never even considered. So once you've gathered all that feedback and you iterate, it's just do it again, but better. You take everything you learned from testing and go back to the drawing board, making tweaks, improving in design, trying not to repeat the same mistakes. It's a cycle. You build, you test, you fix, and then you do it all over again. You don't necessarily have to go back to the start of the double diamond process, just to the point where change needs to happen. So product development is not a straight path. It's more like a roller coaster. But that's part of the journey. Behind every polished product you use, there's a whole process of trial, error, sometimes a bit of chaos. When you finally create the perfect product that people can't live without, it feels like magic. But the truth is, a lot of us create useful or functional or just nice to have products. But regardless, the well-designed products are the result of countless sketches, failed prototypes, and users testing. Just like baking a cake, you got to break some eggs. So why do we need product development? It's not just about making cool stuff. It's about solving real problems, often ones we didn't even know we had. Think about Dyson vacuums. Dyson famously created over 5,000 prototypes before he got it right. What was his mission? Solve the problem of vacuums losing suction. Seems like a minor issue, but how many of us today can't live without our trusted Dyson or any of its clones? Anyone who's used a vacuum cleaner with a transparent collector can relate to a sense of satisfaction that it's doing its job, so you can see it fill up with dirt. Dyson's solution was initially overlooked by the incumbent companies because apparently people didn't want to see dirt. This attitude was clearly an assumption. Believe it or not, this attitude still remains in various industries today. Product development is about fixing things in ways that change our lives, whether it's a vacuum, a smartphone. You probably would never have heard of Gorilla Glass if it wasn't for the smartphone. That's an example of a neglected innovation from the 1960s, finding a home almost 50 years later. When you think of product development, chances are you don't think of the QR code, originally created in Japan to track automotive parts. QR codes are now used for payments, advertising, event tickets, health apps, restaurant menus, connections to websites, and so on. Let's talk about something people hate, failure. In product development, failure isn't just common, it's crucial. Every failed prototype is a step towards something better. It's not a failure, it's a learning moment. Post-it notes, ironically, a poster child of the design industry, was in fact the result of a failure. It just wasn't sticky enough for its original purpose, but now it's found in probably every business across the globe. The customer is a huge part of product development. Even if you've never created a product in your life, you remember that a customer is the one who decides what works and what doesn't. If a product doesn't solve your problem or make your life better, then it's doomed. Ever buy something and immediately think, who designed this? Did they even test it? Well, that's when product development failed you. We all have that team that seemed like that item that seemed like a great idea when you bought it, but now it languishes in your drawer or on a shelf. And again, why do we need product development? It goes beyond just creating cool and innovative items. At its core, it solves real world problems, whether they're everyday, inconvenience, or global challenges. Like the zipper is a product, an EpiPen is a product, both developed for specific needs. It drives innovation. Without product development process, many groundbreaking technologies just wouldn't exist today. Electric cars, artificial limbs. Not all product development is about creating something new. Often it's just about improving what already exists. Look at the car. It's essentially the same product for the past 150 years. When it comes to economic reasons, if companies don't evolve their products, they risk becoming obsolete. Product development is crucial for staying relevant in competitive markets and meeting consumer expectations. So I know there are various arguments around the benefits or lack thereof around consumerism, but that's a different discussion. The thing is, many modern product development efforts focus on solving pressing social and environmental issues, whether that's creating products that reduce carbon emissions or cleaning up oceans. The thing is, it's still driven by consumer demand. A key component of modern product development is improving the user experience, making products more intuitive, efficient, and enjoyable for you guys to use. The thing is, product development is never going to go away because today's solutions are tomorrow's problems. Plastic was once the darling of innovation. Now it's the villain. You can debate how much of it is deserved, but that, again, is another discussion. Now, we can't talk about the future of product development without mentioning AI. It is already speeding up some of the process. The idea is it should help us design smarter products, help predict what customers will want, and test the products in the digital environment before they exist in the real world. As far as my experience in AI goes, it's just another tool in the toolbox. So next time you use that coffee maker or your phone, jump into your car, scan that QR code, book a room on Airbnb, take a moment to appreciate the journey it went on, the effort people have put into taking it from someone's wouldn't it be cool if moment to the product in your hands. Product development is the magic behind the scenes of everything around you. It turns dreams into realities and solves problems we didn't even know we had. Yep, and thank you. I'd love to hear from you. And if you want to connect later on, you can scan the QR code on the end. Thank you. Martin.
Um, my name is Martin Gilchrist. I'm the practice manager at Gilchrist & Co Chartered Accountants.
Good afternoon, go on, Martin.
And we have been very successful because we stuck to one simple principle, and that was make life easier for our customers. And the way we made things easier for the clients, we decided that we were only going to offer 4 services, and we were going to make sure that when we offered those services, we made it as easy as possible for our client to comply with their requirements, and we made it as easy as possible for them to get those jobs done. Now, in order for us to stay successful with our service business, we have to innovate on those 4 services continually, and we're constantly thinking about it. As a product innovator, developer, do you think is there a substantive difference between the way you should innovate a service and a product, or is it basically the same principles apply across both?
Yeah, it's basically the same principles that apply for any form of innovation, whether it is a service, whether it's a process, whether it's a product. At the end of the day, you want somebody to use it. You know, you need somebody to use your service. You need somebody to use your product. You need somebody to use your process. We're humans at the end of the day, and humans are the end user regardless of what we have in the world around us. And sorting out the problem for the user is where you start. So if you have a personal issue, you may say, oh, I've got this problem. And you take that to the user. You take that problem to the user and say, do you have that problem as well? And like the double diamond process, you do that, take it to the user, you ask the questions, you collate that information, and then you take the trends, and what you do is you create the real problem that they have, and that is what you use to solution. So yes, to answer your question, basically, yes, the process is essentially the same. Anybody else?
I just want to say thank you very much. It was very inspirational and the kind of stuff you're saying. But one of the things I just want to bring up was kind of what you're talking about, the modern concept of product design, especially kind of regards to like green manufacturing processes, as well as getting ahead of like government legislation that are going to be taxing small like businesses with regards to innovation.
Sorry, repeat the last bit.
So it's kind of like your design process with regards to kind of how like services that dark red design would provide, and like how you can be able to kind of manage the costs related to kind of changing different type of product development with regards to keeping ahead of climate change and that type of costs associated, especially with regards to the change in green manufacturing processes that are with regards to our concept design.
Yes. Oh, that's an interesting question. Keeping ahead of things. I mean, you can try and keep ahead of what's coming down the line, but you don't know. You have to roll with the punches. So, say you know that government legislation is coming in, you're going to design your product before that legislation comes in order to make sure that something doesn't become obsolete before it hits the market. And that isn't always guaranteed. You're not always guaranteed what legislation comes in. So take, for instance, AI. AI is being developed rapidly and quickly ahead of government legislation. A lot of money is being pumped in. Millions, billions are being pumped in. But nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow. Nobody knows who's going to change their mind. Nobody knows what is going to come in. We can't predict that. We can't predict that. All we can do is work with what we know today, on what we can find out today, and try and mitigate the risk of something changing tomorrow. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. From my experience, it just kind of seems it makes it cheaper for like the end user, like us humans who are trying to do product development, especially with kind of like services like, especially with what you provide with dark red design and stuff. That just find it's better, and it's like it kind of falls in line with all those green manufacturing because you have that localized expert who can like tell you if you don't use tungsten, use a different one, and like that kind of aspect of it.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, when you do the design process, you do try and build in as much sustainability as you can into anything, because it makes your product better. Sustainability does make your product better, and sustainability can simply be that the fact that the product lasts longer. I mean, a lot of the products that we have used and use today are built to a shelf life. And as an engineer, as a designer, if you work with, if you've worked within companies, you'll be told, this must last X amount of time. We have designed obsolescence. And I think that the best way to make something sustainable is to just make it last a long time. Because if you think from the 80s, when you bought a washing machine in the 80s, it would last 20 years. And you wouldn't have to replace any parts, whereby now you buy a washing machine, you have a manufacturer's warranty for 2 years, and as soon as the warranty is done, your washing machine is done, and you have to chuck it out because it's cheaper to buy a new washing machine than it is to fix the washing machine. Now, that isn't a product development issue. That is a manufacturer issue. That's a business issue. And we are quite often walking the tightrope because you don't get paid to do product development if you don't deliver what the manufacturer wants. And at the end of the day, you, the consumer, if you make the demand, if you say, I am not going to buy a washing machine that lasts 2 years, that's when the manufacturers will say, okay, well, the consumer won't buy our 2-year, functioning washing machines. They demand that we have a washing machine that lasts 10 years, 20 years, et cetera, et cetera. part of that goes hand in hand with government legislation. Now, you can, debate, how much overreach a government has in terms of determining something, but at the end of the day, the consumer is the one that drives that demand. And if you say, we're not going to buy it, then we will design it so that we can design a washing machine that will last 50 years if we wanted to do it. Technology is getting better and better and better every day. And when you think about technology 40 years ago to technology now, and as I said, 40 years ago, you could have built a washing machine that lasted 20 years. You can do it today.
Brilliant, thank you. Who's first?
Thank you. Just wanted to add on this. You said technology is getting better. True, decisions are not getting better. And on the topic of sustainability, so there is things such as ethical design.
Yes.
It's not that often used. Mostly it's used in UI, UX, with web development, web product development, but it can be applied to physical product development and services, and that includes sustainability. And basically it means when you said like we can't predict what's going to happen, well, we can analyze using the ethics, right, and consider, let's say, from all the components of product to design or service, is that, for example, if you use this or create this workflow or that product, further down the line in 5 years, is there a potential risk that any of this will harm users or will have, let's say, open an opportunity for misuse, whether conscious, unconscious, or abuse, at a very high level, right? So it's considering the ethics of making the product, producing it, the whole supply chain, using it, disposing of it. And that kind of guides you in terms of how you design the product, sustainability, misuse, abuse, cybersecurity, safety, and all of this. Because whether we wanted to know, it's probably legislation is going to move into this direction, always does, in terms of protecting communities, societies, and people. So that's probably the basic thing we can do. But unfortunately, people don't always use a framework to make those decisions because it's all money. Or at least how can we make something and launch it into the market fast enough? Cut the costs here, there, and everywhere. But there is a framework to do that, kind of try and predict potential risks for this product in 1, 3, 5 years and further down the line. So that's, sorry, that's not a question, it's just said in to the conversation.
Thank you for adding that, yes.
It's on conference, right?
Yes, yes, and you're right there, and those are the things that we're doing to combat the issues that we've had, that we've created for ourselves. And as I said to you, this is what product development is solving the problems that we've created from yesterday. So, what we do today is being determined due to the decisions that we made yesterday. And maybe some of those decisions that we made yesterday, we thought they were good decisions. And sometimes, it's not until 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the line, you go, oh, well, you know what? That was good then, but we found out that, it's not today. And then we need a new system, a new process put in place to solve that problem that we created.